Welcome everybody for the February Q&A. We have Chris Perkins and Ben Dean, Director of Everything Marketing. And we're going to answer some of your guys' questions. You guys ready to go?
Ready here.
All right. Jabba, would you start out by telling us how the current build is looking and talk a little bit about what's coming up in Season 2?
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and wrap the first two questions into one, because the next question is regarding the issue with experience and loot tables that we had on day one, which we've been working on. So far the season is going well, but as some of you know, we recently released some significant updates to our persistence and our memory architecture, and in spite of the internal testing that we do, having hundreds and hundreds of players playing like we did on day one, season one, it revealed some issues related to experience gain, loot tables, things that we needed to address. And the best way to put it, if you know, but best way to put it is we've had sort of like an EQ mischief server experience going on so far in season one, which in some ways has been kind of fun. It's actually been kind of interesting. And, who knows, maybe there's a rule set down the road in store for us, because it's just an interesting take on things. But obviously that's not how we intend things to be. And essentially would boil it down to say very randomized experience, where killing a level 1 would give you a huge amount of experience. Sometimes you'd find, really awesome loot on, a bat or a rat or something that, shouldn't have anything like that. So we do believe we've fully resolved those issues now, and a patch should be coming out today to have our testers start testing those changes. And then once that build has had about 24 hours in the hands of our testers, and we're able to really prove that the issue is solved, then we'll bring the server down, do a fresh character wipe. And as I've said, my hope is that that's the only wipe we need to do this season. But yeah, other than that experience loot table issue, things have been great from our perspective. I know a lot of players are aware of the impending wipe, and so they're waiting on that to happen to dive back in, and so we're excited to get it done ASAP.
Yeah, that's kind of hard when they're waiting for a wipe because nobody really wants to progress. Also, while the loot tables are fun, it drives some people insane.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're not signed up for an experience like that, it's very it's not the greatest experience. But there is a lot of fun to be had in it. And,
It's definitely interesting. Definitely interesting. So how are we looking for season 2?
good. Everything's on track. Have we announced what season 2 is going to be focused on yet, other than just the title of it?
No.
Okay. I didn't think we had, so I'm gonna hold back spoilers. But and I mean, it seems like a lot of people already kind of have some kind of
guessed it. Yeah.
But anyway, things in this new area, whatever that ends up being, who knows? But things in this new area are looking really good. Can't wait till we can talk about it more. But I think players are going to have a lot of fun with it. And a lot of other good updates happening as well, aside from just that main point of content with, just programming updates, things that we're targeting to be working on. We're going to be starting on that lighting pass that I've hinted at a few times now, to really drive us more towards that. We have more of our stylized approach to our art now that everyone's fully aware of. But we're wanting to take our lighting and really drive our lighting more into a realistic lighting direction. And there's a really interesting and cool relationship there between the stylization and the realistic lighting that I think is going to really even further help set our visual footprint in place. And it's going to pave the way for some really cool updates in other areas, like our visual effects. A lot of the visual effects Codeman has been working on rely on that kind of lighting to really be at their best. And so we've held a lot of those back until we can get them in the new lighting, look dev those and dial them in. So a lot of cool visual effect updates happening. both environmental and player, and some other things as well. Doing a pass on, as we've talked about, dialing in nighttime a little bit better, dialing in internal darkness for things like caves and subterranean areas, player light sources, things like that. Should see some nice improvements there. But yeah, looking forward to season 2.
And that's all going to be in season 2?
That is the plan. Yeah. The plan with this patch that we're going to be pushing out with the wipe is that it could be our only patch of this season. We're going to have to see how things go, but we're intentionally trying to carve off some time for us to get the lighting changed and then do kind of all of the little odds and ends and things connected with that I just described, and make sure that's all ready to go. It's possible, if we get that into a good place quickly enough, that we may do a patch before alpha and betas come in, and it'd be great, to be able to have the lighting roll in at that point, but we're not promising that just yet.
Okay. I also saw in the patch notes that we're going to release later that players will be able to move between servers with their one character. So that is exciting for you guys.
It is, indeed.
Yeah, Rizel got that all worked out, so yay. All right, I got a couple questions for you, Ben. With the introduction of seasons and all the pledge levels getting access, are we going to remove the PA forums or even upgrade the current forums to the PA format?
Yes. Okay.
You have to say more.
Let me dive into this a little bit more. So for those of you who've been around for a while, you understand already that the forums as they exist right now on PantheonMMO.com are tied to the pledge system. It's all one CMS, if you would. So in order to change the forums, we need sort of a different solution that separates the pledges from the forums. So that's where the complication comes in. That being said, we are looking at doing things very soon, I'm told. Not necessarily the forums, but our teams are looking into the back end stuff and making some progress there. But we're going to be faced with sort of a choice, and this is kind of the thing that we've been discussing, and I'd like to get some thoughts from you guys, because we could do various things. As mentioned in the question, we could move everything to the existing pre-alpha forums, because obviously we've changed format now, so we could do that way. Or we could upgrade the existing forums, which would be a great idea, but again, you have those complications. That would take some time. The other thing is we could drop it all together and go with Discord. I know that a lot of you have been using the Discord forums and the stuff built in there. So I'd like to hear kind of the community thoughts on it as well. Like I said, we haven't fully decided on which way that we're going to go yet, but getting your feedback could help us make that decision a bit easier.
Well, yeah, guys. So Discord, I'll throw up a forum thread, and you guys can share your thoughts and feelings on that. I'm guessing that we'll have something in the way of forums, even if it's just minimal, because some people still like to get their information from the webpage.
Yeah, that's the one thing. One of the things that's been brought up too is when you don't have it on. When you have everything in Discord, if somebody Googles a question that they have about the game that's already been answered, Discord, as far as I know, isn't the forum. The Discord forums aren't searchable by search engines, so it's that's one of the downsides. I know.
Yeah, it is. So it'll take some thought, but we're willing to hear what you guys think about it. So Seasons was received really well. You guys, the community has been really great about supporting this change, and you guys seem very into it. I dig it. Are we thinking about doing any sort of season pass for non-VIPs?
So we've talked about that. Here's the problem with that. Here's the real challenge with that, I should say. We'd need, if we did that, we'd need it to be fair, because we don't want to, we want, people have made pledges at their tiers, and we want to make sure that they get value out of those tiers. So that's where the real big problem comes in. We have had the discussion, but that's the biggest thing that came up. It's like, well, how do we do something like that without devaluing other tiers? So the answer is we're not currently doing that. Maybe something will, dawn on us that might make a bit more sense. But as of right now, we don't have an existing plan for a season pass.
And we did lower the entry price for supporters. So yeah, it's $50 now. So it's not very high, and that gets you a week of gameplay in every season. So that's not bad.
Season pass has so much baggage to it anyway, just the name.
It really does.
Makes me cringe a little bit.
It means a lot of different things nowadays.
Yeah.
It just depends on the game,
Battle Pass!
Yeah, we're just not that hardcore. All right, now back to Joppa. Can you elaborate on VR's current vision for capturing the concept of horizontal progression that you have talked about in the past?
I can certainly try. The first thing would be to define what that means, I guess. And maybe the person asking, maybe you all have a different idea, but when I talk about horizontal progression, I mean, forms of progression that aren't related to the vertical level climb, essentially. So what am I doing in the game other than just getting levels and reaching for max level? And nothing's really changed as far as our plan, our goal, the vision. Obviously, we have our secondary spheres, so perception and crafting, both which, to a large degree can be progressed independently from adventuring or traditional leveling. So there's those systems to lean into. I guess the more intangible thing to say, at least in concept, would be how the emphasis we want to put on exploration and discovery with that. And I know so many times before about modern MMORPGs, and I've used World of Warcraft as a great example, where lots of amazing zone design and art, and there's a lot of content in that game as well. But because it is so quest hub driven, you find yourself kind of your focus as a player and your attention as a player is only on the kind of the next part of that track that you're on, and you can go wander around zones as much as you want, and you can see a lot of interesting things, but you know that this doesn't have any relation to me because I don't have a quest for it, and so I don't ultimately really feel like I'm doing a lot of exploring in those worlds. I'm more getting frustrated that I can't find just the little thing I need to find to progress this quest and move on to the next place. So a big part of what Pantheon ultimately is going to be about is that rhythm of exploration and discovery, always being an incentive to move and look around the world in search of things to find. And this could be everything from rare NPCs, special events that players can trigger, treasure chests or rare single item spawns, rare resources, perception pings that are off the beaten path that either provide a bit of lore or may initiate even a full storyline if you happen to have the right prerequisites for it. There's a depth of world interaction. There's objects in the world that you can interact with. There's lootable props that you can engage with, and so when I think of horizontal progression, there are some of that aspect, some of that definition. I would just include, what am I doing when I log into the game if I'm not just focused on leveling? Is there anything else I can do and just engage in? And the more that there is to do in the world, and the more that the world can open up as you do that, the better. And so I count that as a big part of kind of the horizontal experience of Pantheon. And the last thing I would say there too is that has a lot to do with our traversal mechanisms as well, and systems. So whether that be climbing, whether that be swimming, eventually, things like gliding, there are aspects of those systems that you can actually progress in. And interestingly enough, like right now, climbing, for example, the climbing skill, as you improve in climbing, your climbing speed, you get faster at climbing. You don't use as much endurance when you climb. Eventually, your climbing skill will relate to the kind of surfaces that you're climbing. So if you're climbing a normal rock surface versus an icy surface, or a slimy surface, or something like that, your climbing skill is going to help you do that more, and itemization is going to help you do that more effectively. But right now, those skills level up very quickly, relatively quickly, and are relatively easy to keep maxed out as you level up. Where I want those eventually to go, once we're outside of such a heavy testing focus, is that there really needs to be a lot of time invested in developing these skills, so that if you really want to be really good at climbing or really good at swimming, and therefore able to engage in those exploration elements of the game, that you have to invest a pretty significant amount of time into doing so. And then, of course, the time also that would need to be invested in the itemization needed as well. So that, players who are able to climb really well, or swim really well, or, eventually glide really well, things like that, are players that have really invested a lot of time into that outside of just that vertical level progression.
So we have kind of a quest hub happening in Avelia. That's not intended. We're eventually going to spread those NPCs around, right?
I'm sorry, which NPCs?
The ones in Avelia.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So Avelia is relatively hub-like right now, purely for testing purposes. It's designed right now to consolidate a lot of what you need to get in and get started quickly. Yes, that will spread out quite a bit more. Things won't be so compact. I could talk a lot about that, specific details of how that will happen. But for example, right now there's not a whole lot of emphasis put on a individual character class's starting spot. Some of you will remember back at the beginning of PA5, as we called it, where we had the gray box zone, the shaman starting area had a lot of interaction there with the shaman guildmaster and some of the shaman NPCs in that area, and it was much more of a fleshed out experience. Our new player experience and kind of that path that you're on and where you start the game is something that we'll be leaning in more into eventually. For right now, a lot of that stuff is packed pretty tightly into Avelia itself, and so it does feel very much more hub-like than is intended at the moment, but that's on purpose.
Yeah, the community's been talking a lot about the new player experience. Do you have anything that you want to add to that conversation, or any plans that you have for the future?
Not anything specifically, other than it's something that we're aware of. I'll use an example from the evaluation dungeon that we did. We're one of the very first. If you chose a rogue, then one of your very first interactions was you went up and talked to the rogue guildmaster in that area, and he's leaning up against the wall and he's kind of talking down to you and whatever, and he's not really wanting to give you the time of day, but he says, hey, if you can go downstairs and steal the lieutenant's blade off of her desk and bring it back up to me, then maybe we can talk. And it's this really cool moment where you go down there, there's a blade sticking out of her desk. If you click on it to take it, it alerts you and says, you sure you want to do that? Because she's standing right there. But if you stealth and do it, then you can take the blade unseen and then bring it back up and turn it in. And it's this great moment where you really feel like a rogue. You're doing something only a rogue can do. And that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be leaning into when we get a little bit further along here, is making sure that each class, has these interactions that really drive home what your persona is in the world. Again, we're not newborn heroes. We're not starting at level 1 at the top of the world hero characters, but the class you pick and the race you pick too all kind of factor into the flavor and the identity that you're entering the world with. And we want the starting areas to really help you feel that.
That's fun. I really like that. Okay, how far down the road are synergy spells and abilities? How early in a player's leveling journey should they expect to see synergy abilities between classes?
Well, they're not far down the road at all if you consider that they're already in. There are several that are already in. So because this is the direction that we're taking our weapon techniques, and it's something that I'm working with Mark, with Fusoya, pretty heavily on, and that is, I'll just give you an example. Right now, a rogue, once your slashing skill gets high enough, they can learn a weapon technique called Swift Blade, and this attack deals a minor amount of damage, but more importantly, it puts the target into an off-balance state. And now, if there's a monk in the group using a staff, if that monk's staff skill is high enough, they will have learned a weapon technique called Sweep, which exploits that off-balance state to actually knock down the target, effectively stunning them for up to 5 seconds. And there are several other combinations of synergy abilities and states in the game already, and there'll only being more added over time. But it is where we're wanting to leverage our weapon techniques right now. There will be class abilities as well, certain class abilities that can exploit and kind of riff off of these states and things weapon techniques do as well. But predominantly the weapon techniques are going to be that arena.
Okay. Crafted gear currently has infinite lifespan. Once an axe is made, it can be sold and resold forever. This will quickly devalue all crafting other than possibly goods that require rare dropped materials, and then only if the goods are soulbound. What is the plan to keep crafting valuable at all tiers?
Well, this is an interesting question because it's not just a crafting question. I mean, all items are really subject to the same question. They don't leave circulation. So what do you do with that ultimately? And first of all, many crafting items are going to require rare dropped materials. So it's always possible. And well, I'm not sure where the maybe the miscommunication has come from, because we've never said that there would be no drop items. The only point I've ever made is that we weren't going to utilize a fully soulbound, like a full soulbound system for all itemization. But there will absolutely still be some no-drop items. And so it's important to recognize that also can apply to the crafting system, just as it can apply to adventuring and anything else where itemization is involved. So there will still be rare dropped materials. There will still be certain materials that could very well be no drop, and so forth. But to the greater point, the infinite nature of items is true for all itemization, not just crafted items. And there are a few ideas we want to experiment with down the line for ways that items can be recycled, ways that items can be pulled out of the general circulation of items, and we can talk about those more when we get to that stage. I've already hinted at one of them already. I don't think it was on a Q&A. I think it was in some internal or some VIP Discord conversations. But with the way that that we might, I should say might, but I think it's a pretty good chance, the way that we might interact with a transmog system is in not only having to have a certain item that you want to extract the quote unquote the skin of that item from, but actually needing to sacrifice that item to do so, which could be one way that we introduce this item recycling, and just one of several that we have ideas for, but it's something we'll talk about at some point.
Okay. Combat text and player.
Oh, and there's also, sorry, I just remembered too. There's also the opportunity to salvage certain items when it comes to crafting. I think that'll just be more of kind of like a fundamental aspect of that system. So that is another kind of built-in avenue where we'll be seeing item kind of recycling happen, where certain items can be broken down intentionally for parts and different resources as well. But again, these are just a couple of ways. There are others, and we'll talk more about that as we get further along.
All right. Combat text and player health bars make seeing what's happening very difficult. Will there be a toggle for those health bars, and will the combat text be moved so we might be able to catch those mob cast bars or even tell when the tank loses aggro?
So UI form, art, readability, the whole 9 yards there. First of all, they are not priorities for us right now. That does not mean that we aren't aware of how crucial these elements are, how much of a pain it can be. Some of those UI elements can be, as far as readability and things being in the way and whatnot, being able to put things exactly where you want them and so on. So we do plan for a full pass on these elements to make sure that modern levels of customization are available to players. But it's in the, if it isn't broken right now, don't fix it category. It's also in the, it's very annoying, we should fix this soon category, but it's having to take a necessary lower priority right now to other things. But we are aware.
Is it fair to say that the UI is all just going to get overhauled later down the road? That's
extremely fair to say. Yes.
Okay. Somebody asked, I was recently reminded that in some games when calculating line of sight, use a position that has nothing to do with the head or where the eyes are located, and instead use the character's center. So when in first-person view, you might be able to see 3/4 or more of the target, but they're not in line of sight. Are you guys planning a system that is more in line with what can be seen from the head? So basically, I think they want to know how our line of sight is going to work.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm not going to answer right this second on what parts of the body the line of sight is going to be attached to, whether it's going to stay right at head level, whether it's going to move to chest, belly, like ground location, like in between the feet kind of thing. What I can say is I am not happy with the current feel of line of sight in Pantheon. It's too easy to be exploited. And so when it comes to the upcoming combat passes that we're going to be doing, line of sight is a big one. So I will say that. We'll talk a little bit more about it once we get to that stage, with the community, with the testers. We'll be asking for more direct feedback on some of that stuff as we, experiment with a few things. But line of sight is too exploitable right now. I want us to explore some ways to still allow it to be leveraged, and obviously still, make sure it's doing what it needs to do. But that might involve changing some of how it works fundamentally.
That sounds good. Also, Bronson, what is wrong with you? What are you doing? Oh my God.
That's okay. A great answer. Everything.
Yeah, right. And Rob thought I was weird. Okay. So log parsing. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Will we allow it? Will we encourage it? Why or why not?
I don't have a problem with it personally. We just haven't extended that visibility to testers yet. So I am going to, after reading that question, I'm going to flag that as part of an internal discussion we need to have for the upcoming combat system pass, and just kind of make a final call on what we're going to do there now, because it would be extremely valuable right now for testing, and I lean very much towards allowing that, supporting that, encouraging that. So we'll have some info on that soon.
Well, I can think of a few people that would be so happy to have log parsing. It's like Christmas. So zoning is currently not seamless through Throne Fast to AVP. What's up with that, and when will that be a thing?
Well, that's true. It's not currently seamless. There is a short loading time that happens there. And the best thing to say is, again, it's it's something that will be addressed. Fully seamless is what we've set everything up for and to be. There are a few more steps left to get it to that point where it can do that seamlessly and smoothly and cleanly. But right now, what we have works, and it works well. And that's what we're going to be running with for the time being. And then, we'll circle back on that when we've, to put a little bit of a finer point on it. I feel like we say this every single time we do this, but we have a very small team, and the couple of programmers that we have, what we put them on needs to be the right thing for them to be working on at the time, because that they're the only few that we have. And so right now, what Pantheon needs most, if we look at this as still in a very, pre-launch, we're still in this pre-alpha state, if you will. We are developing the game, in view, playable as we go along, which is one of the reasons why I love Seasons. It is absolutely something we should have done a long time ago. And we are developing the game while our community is playing the game. And when I think of some of the greats that have come along in this kind of way, top of my head is, a game like Subnautica, for example, where, very early on, game is being developed, people are playing it, they're giving feedback, developers making updates. It's this very wonderful symbiotic give and take. And so when we think about things like, well, why isn't zoning seamless? It will be, but what we're doing right now is focusing our resources on making sure that the systems that Pantheon relies on to be unique, to be an experience worth having, and to kind of take its stand in the current market of other MMOs that are available and really be what it's meant to be. The best way I would put it is to give the classically spirited experience that we all know and love a chance to be experienced again, and maybe even adopted by some fresh blood who have never known something like it. We need to make sure that those systems that are necessary are in place. And so things like zoning, things like UI, these things are very important. And UI is very important. But we need to get the planned systems in place. We've been talking about dispositions and traits for years. They need to be in the game. And there needs to be more of an expression and experience of them to really see what it's going to do for Pantheon's combat and encounters. We need Pulse, our Pulse system back in place. I think we're going to talk about that more in a second. But we need lore and story and these dimensions of NPC dialogue and player interaction and player choice and these things to be in the game and functioning. We need climates. When it's Hangor's time to come out, that place needs to feel cold, needs to feel frigid. You need to feel your screen freezing as you go in there, and you need to be incentivized to really put time into acclimating to that area and experiencing what it has to offer. These are just a few of the systems that Pantheon needs, and that's where our focus is right now. We've spent a ton of time on back end. We spent a ton of time on networking and persistence and memory architecture and all this stuff to make sure that this game can scale. But the time is coming very soon. You can ask anybody it's a lot of pressure from me. We've got to start working on this stuff and as soon as possible. So that's where our focus is. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but there are things we will circle back to once the heart of Pantheon and its systems are in place.
That was inspiring. I'm inspired.
Good.
We're going to get a freaking game made, guys.
That's right.
All right. So since you mentioned it, and since it does happen to be next on my list, lore, when are we going to see it? Yeah.
So that's coming in you're going to start seeing that starting to come in, the fruit of what I was just talking about with Pulse. Pulse is a system that Rob, our producer, back when he was doing programming, that he built. And that was with myself and Jane Gerhardt and Tim Wathen and others, feeding into that. Like, this is what we need. We need to be able to, when we come into proximity of an NPC, just by being near them, we want them to say things in a little chat bubble and give off different messages. And we want just that alone. If you come into contact with an NPC and they say something to you, we want that to flag you, so that, I kid you not, and no, I don't think I hate to spoil this, but I'm going to do it as an example. In Thronefast, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers where I can, but in Thronefast, there is an NPC that if you talk to them, they have a few things to say to you, whatever. But if you go to some part of the zone, I'm not going to say where it is, and you climb to a very specific place, and where you end up kind of standing in a very specific spot. It's not a massive place. It's not, it could be anywhere. It's a very specific thing, and if you climb to it and stand in a very specific spot, that alone, and this pulse system governing this, that alone flags you to where if you happen to go back and speak to that NPC in Avelia again, they will say something to you that they would never have said before, because you've been to that location. And that actually triggers the ability to start a storyline. And that right there, that one interaction is kind of the heartbeat of what is meant to make Pantheon feel different, where the decisions you make of where you go, and if you take that extra 5 minutes to just climb to that one spot, you never know if that's going to do anything for you in the end. And there's going to be clues. If you climb to that one spot, there's a little perception ping that you get, so it gives you an idea that, hey, I found something here. We're not trying to there'll be some things that are super obscure that you just won't know unless kind of the stars align, and we kind of like that, and we're okay with that. If that's like 2 or 3% of, or maybe 5% of the overall things there are to do. But for the most part, you're gonna get pings, and you get things that kind of alert you, hey, there was something to that place I just went, or something to that thing I just interacted with. But that is so key. It's so critical. And so getting that system back fully in place, and what that does for lore, immersion, and just the player's overall interaction with the world is so important. So that's something that I'm pushing for, and I've been talking with Rob about how that really needs to be our next priority when it comes to systems. Even above, and some of you may not like this, but even above classes, getting that back in place because of what it represents for the game, also so that it can be tool-wise something that can be being worked on, so that runway is open now for content to start being developed and re-hooked back up in place. It really, to me, represents the highest priority of what we need to work on system-wise. And so, yes, expect lore, expect world interaction, these things to be coming back in soon, starting, according to our current plan and trajectory, starting next season.
Ooh. That's what makes Pantheon, guys.
Yeah, it's huge.
I saw that Phil from PVL is in the house. You guys want to let us know how the sound is in game?
Talk about the calmest, most low-key, soft-spoken guy you can think of, Phil from PVL. Yeah, it's hard to get that guy excited about anything. It's hard to get him to the point where he's feeling anything about anything. So I'll be interested to see.
Can he even talk?
Yeah.
I've never.
No, I don't know. I don't know that I've ever actually heard him talk. If he does, it's very soft-spokenly and very minimal.
No, he comes into chat and he's usually pretty stoked. But yeah, it's sound is great, guys.
I'm kidding, by the way. Hopefully that's not lost.
Yeah.
Kidding.
Yeah, he's very He's very
introverted. He's yeah.
Yeah, if you catch him in game, you can you'll know. All right, proxy
yeah, Desmond's right. I think we could just say he is very.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Bill is he's very. I like that.
And we like it.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So Proxy would like to know what's happening with auction houses or brokering. What's the deal there?
This is Proxy asking?
Proxy asked, and he's
I don't
been.
have anything to say. I don't have anything to say.
Oh, dang!
Kidding, Proxy. I'm kidding. However, I really don't have a lot I'm going to say here because we don't have any specific plans for implementing auction houses until the Majority of Kings Reach is finished and playable. So that's just something that once we get closer to that point, we start nailing things down, getting things implemented. We'll talk about it then. I know there's a couple of hot point items that community really wants to hear about. Things like, are they going to be regional or are they going to be universal? Is there going to be, what's the tax mechanism going to be like? And, how are items going to be delivered? And are you guys going to have mailboxes and all this stuff? We will get into that when the time comes.
Eventually. Soon, guys. TM. All right. So, Joppa, you apparently hate consumables. Can you elaborate on why?
I do not hate consumables. I do not dislike consumables. That sounds like a misquote. That sounds like maybe something I could have probably spoken about it more clearly. I guess.
Yeah. So you're going to have to speak about it clearly now. Tell us about consumables.
Let me be clear. I like consumables. What I don't like about consumables is when they become required and expected elements of gameplay to the point where they are just, you have to carry certain consumables on you at all times because to do this content, that content, to do anything, you have to have all these consumables on you. The way that I like consumables and the way I want them to be in Pantheon is they are potent, but highly situational and somewhat punitive, meaning they offer advantages but also come with disadvantages to discourage mindless and constant use. And I want them to be balanced in a way that does not replace something a character class should be relied on to do in social play. That's the key. I love consumables, and we want consumables in Pantheon. We want them to be sought after and used, but I don't want, to go into content having to have this potion because it gives me a strength buff for this long, and this potion because it gives me, frost resistance for an hour, and this potion because it, I don't want to have to carry all of these click it and forget it consumables into everything. I want certain consumables that I use situationally, that I have to make decisions about which ones I have and which ones I use, which is why we talk about the potion belt and having only, a very finite amount of consumables you can use, but that they're powerful, but they are somewhat sacrificial. They have innate disadvantages or penalties to using them, and that they're not taking over the place of something else that another class should be relied on to do. At least not, it's okay if you can pop a consumable because the class who you would rely on to do it needs rest and it's for this one moment you have a consumable to kind of fill in the gap. That's great, but not just cyclically every time you're just popping something kind of thing. So that hopefully that clarifies.
They want to know about arrows.
What about those arrows though? Arrows. I've already said what there is to say about arrows. The plan for arrows. We're not going to do consumable arrows. I'm sorry. I understand the arguments for it. That's not lost on me. But I am thinking of our arrow users. I am thinking of all of the things already that players will need to manage and keep track of and all that. And I think we can do every bit as much cool gameplay for arrow users without having to manage stacks of depleting arrows by having, kind of the infinite arrow approach and having all kinds of different arrows, but the infinite arrow approach to ammo.
Yeah. Using arrows and then losing stacks of arrows, consumable arrows is almost akin to durability on armor or weapons in a way.
Yeah, it is to some degree. And if we were doing that, if we were going that route where there was this kind of minutia based upkeep on things like armor and weapons, and to the degree that they would eventually break. And magic casting classes had more of a punitive. They run out of some kind of resource that they need to cast. Like every spell required like regents, and you had to have like 999 paradots and whatnot on you to make sure you can cast all your firebolts or whatever. Then maybe, but the argument for limited stacked consumable arrows is one that, if embraced, should naturally be applied to any other class that attacks in various ways, where you have a limit to. It's basically requiring a regent. You have to have a depleting regent to be able to do what you do, and rangers specifically will rely on them so heavily that it's a weird imbalance to force on that one class that we're just not going to do. We're just not going to do that. There are going to be some things that we don't do, and that's one of them.
Yeah, we're gonna have to let it go. I'm not putting that question in here anymore, guys. Okay, so now that we're done with that,
paradon'ts. Yeah, that's nice.
What's the status of implementing a loot system?
It's on the radar. It's going to become more important, I think, as players have more dungeon-like content to start contending with. So once, places like Hangor and Mad Run and Halnir Cave and Black Rose Keep start coming online, it's going to be important to have a loot system. So we know what we want to do for our first pass, which is going to be pretty basic approach. Need before greed, basically, type system. We'll probably allow for things like master loot, round robin, just to kind of cover our bases. But I think primarily people are expecting a need before greed system, where loot the drops, be flagged for a roll, and you can click whether you need it or if it's greed roll, and that's on our radar. I don't foresee that being a super heavy lift for us to get in. I'm pretty sure Steve could knock something like that out pretty darn fast. So that's all I'm going to say on it right now. We haven't slotted it in yet, but it's on the radar, and it's something that we really need to get in as a lot of the dungeon content's coming online.
Dungeon content meaning all the good loot.
A lot of good loot. Lots of good loot.
All right. Shamans, are they going to get a self-res, and when?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Is that clear enough? I mean, is there anything else I need to say? That's obviously pretty.
I don't know. I don't know. Shamans, what do you think?
Yes and no. No. Yes and no. Yes, in that they will have something like a self-res, but it's not a full res. Essentially, it's going to allow them to come back from the dead for a period of time. There are certain things that they can do during that time, but it is not them fully resing themselves as a resurrection spell would do.
Ooh, interesting. That sounds like fun. Okay. Can you talk about the process of moving the old art assets over to the new style and what the stages are of that process? Or we're doing that with AVP, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead and talk about that, Bronson.
Why doesn't he ever come in here?
He says what?
Bronson, go.
But for real, I'm going to save that for something Bronson can speak more fully to at some point. There's a lot of steps to it, and you'd probably enjoy hearing it from someone who lives it each day. So I'm going to delegate that to Bronson to answer at some point.
Yeah, there are a lot of steps, but it is cool to see the process of it. I peek in there every now and again to look and see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what classes are you currently working on?
Okay, so the next class to be implemented is the Summoner. And then the current classes that I'm working on, well, I'm currently making lots of little tweaks here and there, most recently to the Paladin and the Cleric. So the Paladin, in the last patch we did, we just introduced Well, we introduced Righteous Flame, which is a self buff that gives them a proc on their melee attacks, or a chance to proc divine damage on their melee attacks, which has been really good. And also, the new Paladin ability coming in with the patch today is Valiant Cross, which is actually a cleave attack that they have. Costs 200 Wrath, has a 5-second cooldown. I'm expecting and hoping for it to be a nice Wrath spender, and start getting a little bit of that cleave gameplay in for the Paladin. So that is the newest one for the Paladin. And then the Cleric, I just added in the barrier spell for Cleric last patch, which is an Absorb Shield, and starting to get them into their shield base kind of damage avoidance, or damage mitigation, anti-damage way of healing. But I've evolved that a little bit since then, and so in the patch that comes in today, you're going to see the barrier spell broken up into 3 progressional stages. So it's going to be an ability line, starting with Frail Barrier, and then Weak Barrier, and then Barrier, and it'll continue to go from there and evolve. And the way that it works now, when I first implemented it, it was a 15% of your maximum health, which was the amount of the shielding. And what I've done since is added a flat amount of damage absorption to that as well, based on the tier. So the Frail Barrier, the first one you get at level 3, will have will absorb a flat amount of 40 damage plus 15% of your maximum health on top of that. And then Weak Barrier is a flat 80 damage plus 15% of your max health. And then at level 18, the Barrier, when you get Barrier, it'll be 150 flat damage absorption plus 15% of your max health. So it's meant to be kind of an interesting mechanic for clerics, that, just to, obviously clerics are looking to increase their wisdom, increase their intelligence. They want to increase, other various stats for that kind of soft specking, but it's kind of an interesting play, similar that the Dire Lord has, where some of their abilities for clerics, like their shielding, will actually play on how much max health they have. And so it provides kind of a new, interesting incentive to get your health higher where you can, because it's going to directly benefit your barrier spells.
You said the Summoner's next class that's going in?
That's the next class slated to be implemented, yeah.
What's after that?
After that is Ranger and the range combat system.
Woohoo. All right, so people keep asking about the Bard and what your plan is for the Bard and its role in game. You want to talk a little bit about the Bard?
Just don't ask Phil about the Bard. Not because he's excited about it, not because he cares at all about it, not because he doesn't have any ideas about it. It just makes him angry if you ask him about the Bard. That's the main reason.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is DM Phil.
Literally twice now, Phil has in conversations, he has said, listen, when you get the time and the time is right, please let's sit down and talk about the Bard, because I have so many ideas on how to make that class, and the music and the instruments and the way they do things. And when the head of the audio studio that you're working with is like, hey, I'm really excited about the Bards and the music and their instruments. I mean, come on, it's going to be good. It's going to be really good. So, Bard. I mean, the Bard's role is a support class with kind of that control. The 3 control classes, the 3 classes with control forte are the Enchanter, obviously, the Necromancer, and the Bard. The Bard fits into that with a heavy secondary focus of support, as we all know Bards to do so well.
That's going to be fun. Phil, are you excited for the Bard? Sounds a little OP to me. Yeah.
They can only play Taylor Swift songs. Yeah, well, that's actually one of our Bard skins that you can unlock in the battle pass.
Oh my god.
Oh my god! I
The
almost
Pantheon,
vomited.
the
Sorry.
Pantheon store. Stop it.
Goodness.
It's okay, guys. Calm down. We're joking. Oh my god. Okay. So, would it be possible in the future to have a stable version of the server that is protected from wipes and kept online 24/7 to allow testing in higher level areas? I'm assuming that what they're wanting is they're wanting a server that is maybe a little bit behind the current patch.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to say anything's out of the question, but I do think that this question largely is flowing from the just how tired testers are of us wiping, and understandably so.
Yeah.
We've had to do it a lot. I think, again, assuming that everything goes according to plan, which grain of salt, of course, but if everything goes according to plan, we should be getting into a mode now where wipes are going to be much less frequent. So I don't expect at this time next month for the sentiment to be as strong of like, hey, please give us something stable. We're so tired of things being wiped. I don't think that's going to be the sentiment. If that continues, though, to be an unforeseen and unfortunate state that we're in for some time longer than we would like to be, where we're having to wipe more frequently, it's something that we'll take a look at. But I don't think it's going to continue to be an issue as it has been.
Yeah. The death penalty is not currently in game. When are we going to get that back?
Stay tuned. It's probably not going to be back for this first season, but it's something that we need when we can get it back as soon as we can. Now the interesting thing about the death penalty, though, is, let me just rewind. Let me not answer this on autopilot. Let me think about this a little more carefully.
Yes, tell us about the death penalty.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the death penalty like itself. I'm just going to say that to go back what I was saying earlier about how we're developing Pantheon, we're doing it rough, we're doing it live, like we're going to be okay with rough around the edges. We're going to be okay with things not being exactly as they plan to be. We don't have to do every single aspect of the zone or the mechanic or the what utilities are available to the player exactly how it's going to be at launch, because we're trying to facilitate testing. What that means is you're not going to have necessarily the same benefit right now of players dying and losing all their stuff and having all the those issues in place. It actually might be more advantageous for us to have players be able to die and then get back into the thick of things very quickly. Same for having vendors inside of dungeons and places where players can offload and purchase and train and do these kinds of things more quickly. We definitely do also plan, as we get more of the world in place, more content, more level range, to have strike sessions where players are set to certain levels. They're able to get certain loadouts of gear from NPCs and go do certain things. But on the whole, systems like death penalty, even though they need to be tested for their own mechanics' sake and also just for the feel of the game's sake, I think we're still too much in a state of let's limit the amount of unnecessary disruption and allow players to get back into and stay in the thick of things more quickly, just for general testing purposes. So that's my more careful answer. It's not that the death penalty obviously isn't intended and won't be coming back at some point. When that happens, though, will be based on when it's most advantageous for our needs and our testers.
I kind of like it without the death, dying. It's makes it easier to get things going again.
Yep.
And Finn, I'm pretty sure you like it rough. That's why you're here. Rough around the edges, that is.
Brave.
Moose wants to know if there's some way we could help, if the community could help test a patch before it goes on to prod. That seems weird. Since you
not
guys
in the way
are
that
testing.
we're currently set up. Yeah.
You want to test it before it goes to test? I don't know. That's an awful lot of testing, guys. Nagasaki would like to know if you could talk about character customization and when we might have some of that.
Yeah, we just had a conversation about that. Like 2 days ago, we were talking about that. Rob and Bronson and I, and just kind of reconfirming that it is also in that bucket right now, where it would certainly be nice to have, but it's just anything. As with everything else, it takes time, takes programmer attention, resource, and those are minutes, hours, days that I would rather be spent elsewhere. So it's coming, but not. I'll say I don't expect that, and I don't think anyone internally expects that to be anything we prioritize in chapter 1. And beyond that, we'll have to see.
Yeah. Hey Bronson, how is that ogre looking? Level 12 to 17 content. We have that.
Yeah, there is some of that. There's, season 2 is going to introduce a lot of that. Right now, you're going to be kind of splitting your time between some pockets in AVP and some pockets in Throne Fast that can support that level range. And that'll be the way it is until season 2 opens up.
When are we going to see a little bit more on the warrior? I'd like to know that as well.
Trickle. Things are going to trickle in, just like they've been doing for the Paladin, for the Cleric. And Warrior, Paladin are the two kind of main ones in my sight. Cleric as well, because I had to gut a bit of their kit when the Paladin was implemented. So Warrior, Paladin, Cleric are all kind of, just be on the lookout for a trickle of things coming in. We need to get Warrior battle points fixed desperately so that players know what they're doing and what they have when they have it. So yeah, Warrior love is on the way. Yeah, that's part of the battle pass. Those battle points, that's right.
You're going to have to see yourself out, Des. Ranky wants to know mastery points when for Paladin.
Yeah, for Paladin and Warrior especially.
Trickle.
That's the answer.
There's going to be a lot of trickle. Yeah, that's the real word of 2024 is trickle.
That's it. What was the other one? Both?
Meaty. So meaty trickles.
I like both. I like both of those words. Meaty trickles.
Both. Shart. Oh no. Don't, Bronson, please. For the love of God, don't start it. Oh, that's a good question, Neff. Hey Joppa, what's the most exciting thing that you haven't gotten to talk about yet?
Oh, goodness.
You've been working on a lot. You got to have something in there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I talk about a lot of things too. The thing that's floating to top of mind is Yes, floating. Just floating. The thing that's floating to top of mind is not toilets. No. Is okay. So you guys have been in Throne Fast for like a century.
Forever, yeah.
And we open up AVP, and it looks a lot like Throne Fast. Yeah. So
Well, I wasn't going to say it, but yeah, it does a little.
Yeah, I mean it. It's the same biome largely. What I'm excited about, what I've been able to see, what my eyes have beheld, are biomes and environments that are going to, I think, strongly solidify the fact that we do plan to have a vibrant collection of very different looking areas in this game. I say that about Hangor, where you guys have seen lots of screenshots of Hangor, but Hangor has never looked cooler, never looked colder, like actually like a cold place. Seen pictures of Mad Run that make it look like an absolute slimy, spider-infested nightmare. I've seen pictures that are, I know as they come forward, especially as you are all able to experience these places, are going to solidify that we do in fact plan to and have the means to make biomes and environments that are very, very, very different than what you've seen, and I think really even push the envelope of what you've seen so far before in some of these areas that you've seen before. So I'm excited about that. I wish we could. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to find the picture, that one of the pictures I'm thinking about, and I'm going to throw it in here.
Somewhere I can hear Rob screaming, "No!"
Okay. Let me see.
It's okay. He's authorized. He can do it.
Yeah. Where is? And if there's any more questions, you guys can.
Unless he can't find it, in which case.
Oh, I'll find it. Through sheer will alone, I will find it.
Ah, yes. With different biomes, will we get unique mob models?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's a long list of NPCs just being worked on steadily that are going to be coming in, and the new biomes are definitely part of where those are needed for sure. So, all right, hold on.
Oh, what question, Finn? Finn, what do you need? Are we going to start hiring anytime soon?
As soon as we can.
What specifically?
Artists.
Oh, he wants to know if Sacred and Zoe are going to be replaced. That's... Come on, Finn. Oh, that looks good.
Now, you cannot look at that and look at the other, pictures of Hangor that we've had up, whenever they've been shown or even streamed, and say, the place doesn't look freaking cold. I mean, that place actually looks cold. Now, imagine going in there and imagine you've got these little, around the corners of your screen, you've got these little fingers of frost that are kind of like appearing around the edges of your screen, and you're hearing that kind of crackle of like really cold. And we have the character's breath, as they're breathing, like see the breath, and you've got snow falling in this area, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be really good.
Not just cold, guys.
Frigid.
Bronson, do you want to throw in some screenshots or images? Is he paying attention? Do you have something, Bronson? I hear you do.
I can hear him he's answering you out loud instead of typing it.
It takes him a second. So Des wants to know, while we're waiting for Bronson, which is going to take forever, if the pace of the current season chapters is what we're expecting for future seasons and chapters.
Well, we've committed to a 6-week time frame for each season. So if that's that's, you should expect season 2 to drop 6 weeks after season 1 did.
Oh, hey, that looks like spiders live there. Probably Australian-sized ones. Are we going to keep seeing memory issues?
So I was just looking at the pictures Bronson was posting. Are we going to keep seeing memory issues? I mean, there will probably still be some memory leakage. It's been dramatically reduced, and it's something we'll continue to improve. But we've gotten it now to a level that is very acceptable, that we're comfortable with, and that was our goal.
Yeah, it is looking quite a bit better. Talamat, I don't see us moving up the timeline even if things did get done early. All right. Well, I think that's about it, guys. You're going to have to save your questions for next time. No more Bard. All right. Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Chris, for joining us and answering all these great questions tonight. Everybody got to learn new things. Yes, we're going to patch tonight. We have a patch, and I will get the patch notes out in just a little bit.
Woo!
Fun stuff. All right. I'll see you guys in game.
Always a
On
pleasure.
and up, everybody. Let's go.